Well. They've given up on making Survivor fun so much that they're replacing them with bots. Hey peeps, this is Kizu. Welcome to my ongoing series of explaining why 2v8 is kinda bad in a calm and reasonable manner, only to get hate crimed in the comments. I'm going to attempt to frame this in such a way that even people who might disagree with me will hopefully come out of this video acknowledging the issues at the heart of the game mode. So, let's address the elephant in the room. Survivor in 2v8 is essentially a role that isn't played. My opinion is that it's because the role is just not fun. However, before we go into my full opinion piece, I want to lay out some arguments and some factors to think about in the next iteration of 2v8. First up, the numbers. Obviously, Survivor is essentially a role that isn't played. Even with 400% blood point incentives, and in the second iteration, gaining new and quite strong powers that genuinely shift the balance far more towards survivors, especially coordinated teams. Secondly, Patriarch's attempts at fixing this issue have been to buff Survivor, then buff Survivor, and then also just replace them with bots. Thirdly, I obviously cannot speak perfectly on how the new kills work in 2v8v3. However, while I think both Wesker and Nemesis will probably be fine, Legion's 2v8 kit will likely destroy the balance. They're an immensely effective killer when facing uncoordinated teams with weak links, which 2v6 plus 2 bots in MMR will be perfect for. I acknowledge a fully coordinated team will likely destroy them, but those teams are essentially non-existent in 2v8. Finally, the queues of the main game mode were always ruined when 2v8 was around, and so far we've seen a downward trend on 2v8 player numbers. I expect the Resident Evil license to raise numbers notably, but again, following the logic of how the last two iterations went, the novelty might wear off very quickly. For these reasons, I would argue that 2v8 is a bad game mode as it fundamentally fails to be sustainable past the novelty phase in its current design paradigm. I'm sure there is a game design solution for the game mode. Currently, it doesn't look like changes of such magnitude are on the table. I do not understand how people believe this should be a permanent game mode when people in it don't play one of the roles essentially at all, and it ruins the main mode's queues entirely. In its current iterations, I do not see this game mode being a sustainable and functional alternative to 1v4. I like a lot of the things about it, but I have fundamental issues that are being shut down by the community who are caught up in the novelty. So, let's go into deeper opinion bits, but first up, talking about what I see as the fundamental core issues of all iterations of the game mode. Survivor is not fun. Why is Survivor not fun? Because you're versing two killers at once. Let me elaborate. There are two aspects to both Survivor and Killer in 1v4. Micro, the chase, the pallet stun timings, and macro, 3 gens, decisions where to go. I think it's not an unpopular take to say that most people enjoy the micro moment-to-moment gameplay a lot more than macro gameplay. There's a reason why killers like Blight and Billy are so popular. They essentially eliminate most macro choice and leave you to perfect the chase. I still wouldn't discount the macro aspect either. That's still a good chunk of the community who enjoy that kind of more strategic gameplay as well. Then, of course, there are freaks like me who want to be forced to perfect both regular M1 micro and macro in their ideal version of DBD. Let us compare the level of presence of the two different breeds of gameplay between 1v4 and 2v6 plus bots. 2v8. In 1v4, survivors often have a decent bit of micro agency, especially if they're a bit better than their opponent. They also have a massive individual macro agency. There's like 20 billion videos telling you how not to region, let people hang hooks, position for saves, etc, etc. Killers obviously have a massive amount of both. Part of a scenario where they load in a strapper on battle pace go free with no perks. Their powers often let them put both the pressure on survivors in chase, while expressing themselves mechanically, and juggle 4 survivors on the macro level, regardless of what killer they're playing. Of course, certain strategies, certain perk combos can ruin the fun for either side, but that's outside of the scope of this video. The core point is that in 1v4, bar some external values at a core design level, both sides have plenty of things to do that allow them to express their skills in either micro or macro gameplay. In 2v8, killers essentially lose nothing. If anything, they have even more cool ways to express themselves with their duo, allowing for both more micro and macro play gameplay. They have new, all-improved abilities, team skills, they can 2v1 survivors, they can split pressure. Essentially, the sky's the limit with their core game loop being prudent and bettered. what's happening over at the Survivor camp? Well, their macro decisions essentially are a non-impact. You're 1 out of 8 survivors for most of the match. Odds are, things are just happening. It's full on chaos, and your personal impact on some kind of 5-gen is basically non-existent. Best you can do is use one of the abilities that only really work if you're coordinating your team, which odds are you aren't. Maybe things are okay in the micro department? Well, no, not really. The maps have no interesting tiles to loop, as they're all overtuned, due to the fact that the 2v8 versions of killers are A, more powerful than ever, essentially putting you on a timer of getting hit like OG Chucky, and B, able to team up to negate any kind of place you can make because they just force you to lose by virtue of existing. An important point to understand here is that I'm not concerned with the balance here. In 2v8 second generation, I have these in 8-man could obliterate most killer duos. Survivors are getting even more buffs in the next version. But that's not the problem. Survivor isn't unpopular because it's bad in 2v8. In fact, odds are your escape rate will be higher than in 1v4. There's just a fundamental disconnect between Survivor and Killer as we transition, based by the way, into this new game mode from regular DBD. Killers become augmented, become less stressed, have cool shit to do. Survivors' fundamental gameplay loops become hollowed out and meaningless, transforming the fun parts of a Survivor gameplay loop into glorified generator in one time. The only other thing we get to do is scratch with flashlights and use the ultimate abilities, but that's not going to compensate for the rest of the gameplay loop being completely eroded. This is why Survivor isn't getting played. Now let's talk how it's getting worse in the next iteration. It's Legion. Yeah, it's just Legion. Essentially, as I said earlier, Legion thrives on uncoordinated teams with weak links in them. The 2v8 environment is perfect for that. Sure, you might knock down many people, but why does it matter if you can keep 80% of the other team permanently mending? Get your Blight, Huntress, or any other teammate of your choice paired up with a Legion, and they'll make changes meaningless. I can't say if this will be overpowered. I don't know. Maybe Legion going at Mach 10 after all the speed buffs from hitting with survivors will make it just an instant win. But fundamentally, it's just going to be miserable for survivors. It's incredibly easy to get punished for your team's mistake in 1v4, and with Legion in 2v8, you're going to be punished for it existing on the map, with 1 or 2 bad teammates and forced to spend like half the game mending. Call me crazy, but somehow, I doubt that's an engaging experience that will make survivors want to play more. What are BGR doing to shake up the issues? Well, nothing, essentially. They're adding RE-themed herbs to the map that seem to just kind of blatantly favor coordinates of our teams. So, they're just again, buffing what does need to buffing, further skewing a lot of more comp-focused content creators' perspectives on 2v8's game state. Then, as an essentially minutes of defeat, they're adding 2 bots into the queue. This is basically a resignation letter. We can't make survivors want to play, even if you're buffed them. Even if we give around 50% block points. Well, just replace them with bots. Which, by the way, fare horribly against Legion, and also generally horribly when 2 terror radios are involved. The best case scenario for this 2v8 version is that it's despite the survivors, but loved by killers again, since queue times get slightly lessened by bots, and the games are easier thanks to them. Worst case, the queues get so bad that BHR adds even more bots, or the game mode just gets 2 hour killer queues for 10 minutes of gameplay. This is, by the way, why people are still wowed by the novelty factor. Your ratio of playtime of the killer role to queue time is like 1:5. No shit! It feels fresh to a lot of you still. You actually played the game for maybe a day or 2. You know what the best part of this whole thing is? The scope of the problem gets only worse and worse and worse the more 2v8 is played. But also the scope of the solution required to make the survivor experience is so massive, PHVR would need at least a year to develop it to a playable time limited prototype. How will the game mode be by then? Who knows? So, what's with too long didn't watch? Survivor, not fun. Game mode won't last. They're basically giving up on making Survivor fun. But people are still too caught up in the hype train to realize how rotten this foundation is. Makes you think, how will the FNAF release go? God, I can't wait for Chest Trap. A tremendous thank you goes out to Luna, Peter Morbad, and Surges. You keep the lights on, so thank you. If you'd like to join these very silly peeps and having a bunch of exclusive benefits or just to support me, my Patreon is linked down below. You get exclusive PDS content, a special Discord role, and shoutouts like these. Anyway, now the video is essentially over. I want to put a bit of a gloat section. Now, this will make me look really dumb. If I'm wrong, but I'm all up for being wrong if it means the game is more fun than I expect. My original 2v video, that got a ton of hate, essentially said all of the above, maybe a bit more crudely. Back then, it was a hot take. Come around the second iteration, it still was a hot take, but I found a lot more response. Now, I think we're in part of a cycle where my opinion becomes the mainstream. This has generally happened like obscenely a lot. My favorite examples have to be people glazing Chuckies and Billy's PTBs. When I called out how bullshit both were, I got clowned on for those takes, then they became the mainstream later. Don't get me wrong, it's great to be a vindictive fuck and know I was right before everyone else was. But I'm not going to lie, I'd rather people just fought for rationally from day one and we got a more fun game. If my takes could be far more lukewarm and Reddit or whatever, I'd be much happier. That would mean that BHVR and the community are on top of the feedback cycle and they can look further ahead than a centimeter. At the end of the day, I just want DBD to be more fun for everyone involved. However much some of you might be convinced of the opposite. There is a reason why my opinions drifted so much over time. I change my perspective as the game evolves. A lot of you are just stuck in the same perspective. Thank you for watching, peeps. I bid you adieu.